Okay, let's just take a quick segue now to how I wanted to try and show you Abacus. So sorry, I have had to jump to another machine. So I'll go into this again. Should be able to. This has got single sign-on, so it should just sign me in. So Aaron, I'm not sure if you're there. Just let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, I think it should be okay. It's definitely quite zoomed in on this monitor. Okay, so I'm in BIAN. Okay, so like I say, BIAN is just a reference model off the shelf. That's what it is. It talks about service domains. Okay, so it has over 300 of those, which I'm guessing you guys can't read at this resolution. Sorry, there's lots of service domains in here. For example, that one, securities, delivery, and receipt management. That's the sort of familiar view that people know, the service landscape, and as I said, it's version 8. So behind the scenes, though, with this is an entire, what we would certainly call a service catalog. Okay, it's literally a catalog, which means a list of things. Okay, so you can see there's over 300 rows in this catalog. Lots of metadata around these services. So of course, descriptions and things like that. And as we go out to the right here, you can see there's business roles, there's what's called a control record, which is essentially the kind of deliverable or the document that's involved. You've got examples, you've got objects like information that's involved, you've got processes that are involved, you've got departments that should be using it. So you've got a whole lot of interconnectedness. So the service as it is, and it's a service-oriented architecture, the service as it is the hub. It's the hub that joins together technology, process, people together. Okay, and you've got to think of it like that. Too often when people think of service-oriented architecture, and certainly the Archimate's guilty of this, they have this layered approach where you have these layers in between your business application, let's say technology as a simple 3-layered model, and then a service layer in between. The problem you have with that is this effect we call the Michelin man. You're effectively forcing a very rich layer through an abstract layer, and you lose a lot of the structure of your actual enterprise. Okay, you should definitely think of it a different way, which is a service is like in that case, a ternary relationship, so a 3-way relationship that binds people, process, and technology together. A service technically can bind as many different dimensions together as you want. Okay, so we certainly have services binding like 7 dimensions together, right? Anyway, so that's a more rigorous way of thinking of a service-oriented architecture. It's not a layered approach, which is what Archimate advocates, and I disagree with. It's more of a hub, a way of interconnecting things that are in different domains. Okay, so this is the way BIAN looks at things, which is great. Now these are explorable, and when you start doing like kind of impact analysis, like I can drill into this, right? So I can go into this. So a tree map is of course like a landscape view, right? It's showing you exactly those same rows on the left, but hierarchically grouped. Okay, so I'm now down at 2 levels. If I go into this area, the cross-product operations, right, you can see that the catalog on the left is filtering, right? We're down to only 39 service domains now, grouped into these 4 different business areas. Okay, and we're 3 levels down the hierarchy now. But you can start to kind of understand how these things interact with each other. On the right here, and some of these graphs we've got here, we're showing essentially the popularity of different, in this case, object classes or control records. So you can see here already that the majority of service domains actually have a single control record for each of them, okay? Which is okay, but it is a lot of documentation, okay? As opposed to the information side of things, right? So over on the right here, we can see some different information objects. So that's payments as an object. This sort of I think accounting. So, if I click this payment one, right, it's going to go and filter. I have to mouse off, so it tells the other portlets to update. It's filtered down to 4. There's 4 service domains that are using this information object. Okay, and we're just exploring the repository. If I go out here, you'll see that, of course, they're all using payments as an object class here. These are now the processes that are involved, and of course, in this case, there's no information underpinning that. When we talk about people and technology, we haven't underpinned it there. But you've got all the different bits out of BIAN, of course, off the shelf. So your challenge, of course, would now be to fill in these parts. Right? It is as simple as just double clicking and starting to fill in things. Right? It's very easy to be populating here. It is a case of obviously democratizing this, right? Because you've got hundreds and hundreds of rows of things to do. So needless to say, lots of content there that is all kind of filtered together. But if we go and have a look now in another dashboard, so we've gone through like kind of the service layer, let's drill in and have a look at one of these service domains. So let's have a look at one that's called check processing. You know, there's 300 of these. We could have used any. Yeah, essentially, it's down within the payments, as you saw, like just where I went in the hierarchy. It's down inside payments domain. But this is where you start to see how things are connected. Now, we've got a diagram here. Okay, it is just I was going to say a box and line, but I guess it's circles and lines. Yeah, we're using a notation here, right? Again, BIAN doesn't advocate any notation. By notation, I mean literally the symbols we're using here. Archimate doesn't have a notation either. Okay, so you want to try and choose something that's palatable to the business. You know, these sort of notations we've got here, we've got lots of these. You can import any shape from Visio you like. Okay, you can design your own shapes. But, you know, these sort of notations are pretty good. You know, they're generic. They don't come with much baggage. Okay, your enterprise will have their own notation, right? So one of the things you'll certainly do is configure this and change it to be familiar for people. But what you can see here is the different dimensions that are intersecting with check processing, right? You've got the different processes here. Okay, you've got the department there. Okay, you've got other service domains. So the service domains are interconnected. Okay, you've got technology. So there's a couple of applications here. Okay, and then you've got all those objects, right? Those data entities that are involved. Okay, so you've got people, process, technology, right? All integrated with a service concept as the hub, right? Okay, so you can see that it's this kind of trinity of relationships being pulled together. There's other ways you can explore this kind of stuff. So we have this thing which is called a graph view. Okay, so essentially it's using the same notation that you might be doing in a diagram, but it's, you know, it's a lot more interactive. You know, I can click on a node here and explode it. So that's done the same thing. Yeah, that's taken check processing and shown me now the applications. Okay, so you can see Aperta here. It's got the processes. It's got the finance department, right? So the same content that you might be seeing, you know, can be shown in different ways. So these graph views are pretty powerful ways of exploring repositories. You know, you can go and explore anywhere you need to, you know, and see whatever things are connected to. So I won't go too far through there, but it's a great, simple way to explore how things are interconnected, right? And find you know, where complexity is. You know, obviously a big fan out is a lot of complexity. Okay, but you know, you can produce these sort of dashboards. Remember, self-service. You know, this might be for the domain architect or the service architect who's responsible for this domain, right? In this service domain. So you can auto-generate all these sort of things, right? You know, so you don't need to pre-can them. Okay, let's move into the technology world. So remembering what you're wanting to do is take something like BIAN and then apply a standard set of, you know, content beneath the covers, right? You know, so taking the business layer from BIAN and underpinning it with your technology. So this is a very simple application list. I'm sure you've all got your spreadsheets with, you know, your hundreds of applications in them with whatever properties you're already tracking. So again, ABACUS can just adapt to whatever metadata you have. So, you know, there's a very simple list here. This is, you know, we've got some example applications in here. It's all just kind of, you know, dummy data. But you've got some interesting properties here, right? You've got things like the application criticality. Okay, you've got things like a recommendation, and we'll come back to that. But essentially, you're starting to look at whether you know, a future state for it. You're trying to say, look, these are applications that we like, and so we want to try to retain them. So there's different models. You would have heard of TIME, which is tolerate, invest, migrate, eliminate. So that's one that Gartner advocates. There's another one called 4Rs, which is retain, refresh, redesign, retire. These are these quadrant-based approaches, which are actually deterministic, right? So you can do like a business fit versus a technology fit. So we have algorithms for all these things. We've got lots of them. And so you can take factors like the criticality, okay? You can take a factor like how many users does it have? You can take a factor like what standards, what technology standards is it using? These things all can influence the algorithm, which has been no-coded, to come up with a suggestion for what we think the future state should be. So remembering, the suggestion doesn't mean that's your decision, right? Your recommendation. Okay? A suggestion is just the machine, in this case, giving a recommendation. That may be a machine learnt recommendation, it may be a deterministic algorithm, or a combination of both of those things. Okay? So the idea being, though, is you're managing this technology stuff, but you're underpinning your whole service model, which you're getting from BIAN, with the context of all these applications. Okay, so now you start to have an understanding of, you know, where do they all fit in? And you're maintaining this in a nice democratic way. You know, there's lots of people doing that. Okay, and obviously once you've got that, you can start to do a lot of that analytics. So this is a standard application portfolio dashboard. Again, I won't go into this too much. We've got whole webinars about this. That's showing you that kind of portfolio view where you might look at like business fit versus technical fit, okay? So the top right quadrant are applications that both the business and the IT teams are happy with, okay? So they're probably ones that you're going to invest in, okay? They're certainly ones you're going to retain, okay? The bottom left, of course, are ones where both sides are unhappy, okay? And so they're probably ones you're going to retire. Top left, okay, is where the technical fit is low, but the business fit is high. So that's clearly a tech refresh quadrant, okay? So you can see how this is all pretty deterministic. If you can score it for business fit and technical fit, you can already start to make a suggestion. And that's important here because those colors are actually the recommendation, okay? And you can see that in the catalog here, like retain as green, retire as red, okay? So the recommendation for CRM, okay, is bottom right, okay? Down here, the recommendation is, maybe actually to refresh it, even though it's on the borderline. Here we've got something that we're saying, look, we should retire it, even though the business is happy with it. And then there might be a whole evolution, what we talk about as an evolution, a scenario where you're showing how that application is getting retired, but we're replacing it with a better one. Okay, so all that kind of road mapping side of things is possible, which takes us to the next dashboard, which is, of course, the classic kind of road mapping way of looking at things. So again, we've done whole presentations about this. I won't spend too long on this, but a roadmap is kind of means many things to many people. We talk about 4 types of roadmaps, okay? A Gantt chart, which is what you're looking at here, is actually what we call a type 2 roadmap. All you need to do a Gantt chart is some date properties, okay? And you can see that in the catalog at the bottom there. So if I was to go and explore one of these, let's go into maybe finance, right? The finance dashboard, so the finance roadmap has a collection of applications there, in fact, just 4 of them, and they've got their individual timelines. We can call this a life cycle or a timeline as well with dates. You can see those dates down the bottom there, they're all editable. But what we normally find happens is people calculate those dates, okay? So once something's gone into production, okay, you might have various standards on the technologies that you're using. Those standards might be going end of life. Okay, so you now start to infer the end of life for an application due to the dates on the standards on the application. Where do you get those dates from? We have integrations with things like Technopedia, okay, which are, there's literally millions and millions of standards with their end of life dates that we can use, and you can then infer those dates into a roadmap. Now, remembering all of these things should still only be seen as suggestions. Because you might now go, oh, I've identified a problem here. This thing's going end of life because that standard, Win7 or whatever's out of support. So I need to go and do a tech refresh and, of course, extend that data out. So yeah, don't get too hopeful that this is going to just solve your problems for you. It's just throwing up suggestions, right? It's giving you insights into your portfolio, and it's hopefully informing your decision making so that you can defend it. You're doing all this live, like this all works on a tablet, of course, and you're doing this live when you're in a business meeting and someone's asking, oh, why are we retiring IVR? And you go, oh, okay, well, it's got end of life because it's using, whatever, SQL Server, something that's going end of life. So we need to actually port it across to this other application and rah, rah, rah. So you can have that whole conversation with the business right there and then, which of course builds trust, okay, and expands out your value to the organization because you now get involved in all of those decisions and obviously empower people to make informed decisions. Okay. The last one I'm going to just pop up here is actually just a quick dashboard that does show a bit under the covers some of the things that are there. So we've got some KPI portlets here, which are those numbers and stuff like that. So they're being calculated. And you can see a no-code algorithm there that I've got on the right. I'm not going to edit any of these here today. We've got webinars about all that. But basically, it's block-based. So what this algorithm is doing is it's simply looking at each business domain, okay, counting up the complexity, which is essentially counting up how many applications are involved in delivering that business domain, and then writing that number back onto the business domain. So it seems very simple, right? But it's obviously a very powerful algorithm that starts to give you some insight into the complexities you might have in your portfolio. Now, we can compare those complexities with benchmarks. Okay, that's something like BN is particularly good for. So when we come back to looking at, right back to where we started with the landscape view, which is a diagram, a whole lot of boxes, there's actually ways you can quickly heat map that. Okay, so I've got a heat map here, which is the same landscape, but this time heat mapped according to complexity, only in a few areas. So I'm not sure if you can see the color differences there, but there's kind of some stronger red versus softer red, more salmon colors. So being able to draw the attention of the users to where you think there's unnecessary complexity in your enterprise is very powerful, right? That's just a dashboard, in this case a single diagram, that just continually updates. So as your application owners are doing whatever they're doing, filling in their portfolios, making decisions, so as you've democratized the whole way that people are tracking the digital map or the digital business that you've got, these sort of dashboards are continually being updated, and your business stakeholders can see what's going on here. And you can obviously use this as a trigger for conversations you might want to have just by overlaying heat maps, or in this case, they're a color marker, onto a standard familiar view. So anyone who's familiar with BIAM would recognize this view, and you can start to actually, basically color it according to the way that, the different recommendations, or in this case, the criticality might be. I'll jump into one other one, maybe this one, this heat map. So this one, is just showing two markers on the different, this is about the top level, though, at the business domain level. So it's using an aggregated metric that's aggregating right up. These you can see some color markers down here, right? These color markers, they might be the cost of that business domain. They might be your reference to, your relative performance to benchmarks for that business domain. So this is the idea of these reference frameworks. It's using a familiar view, in this case, 300 boxes all grouped in a certain way, to communicate the underlying work that you're doing as an architecture office to come up with different recommendations and give insights and things like that. So yep, that's about it. So that's really, like I said, it's a bit of a whirlwind tour. We don't have too much time today. So yep, just to quickly wrap up and pass back to Aaron, and yep, we should have some time for some questions. We've got a great tool. We have the best tool on the market. We're the leader of all the Magic Quadrants and the Forrester Waves and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the team. But you would have heard the phrase, a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? The tool's not going to, replace any of us. It's just going to hopefully inform us. And we always talk about giving some quantitative guidance, right? So obviously it gives you some numbers. So these don't just become, subjective debates, right? They become objective conversations, okay? The model is going to be wrong. All models are wrong, but some are useful, right? It's going to be wrong. So, you've got to accept that, the tool is not going to be right, but it hopefully gives you, something you can use to have a conversation and, talk about things, with numbers and make things much more objective, okay? So just with that, so yeah, as I said, obviously go and have a look on our website. You've got the web address down the bottom right there, my contact details there. We're going to provide, well, this is being recorded, so obviously you can watch it back. I'm pretty sure we'll provide the slide decks to you guys, so you'll have all the contact details there. Yep, with that, I'm happy to pass back to you, Aaron, and I'll stop sharing my screen, I guess, and I'll leave you to facilitate the Q&A, I guess. So.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Tim. I think very insightful information about the capability of the tool. And I think it is like, I remember about, I think 6-7 years ago, the year 2 landscape, the capability are quite primitive, but in the last 2 to 3 years, I think they are already catching up with the coolest and the latest technology. I think something quite striking to me about, the ability to some sort of intelligence. Maybe it's like half AI or full AI, but it's almost there. So the tool can suggest in terms of analyzing the impact, the meta model that we have defined, and can make a suggestion. That is nice, rather than
absolutely. We released that feature. It must be at least I'm going to say a year ago, but maybe it was only like 9 months ago. And obviously it's just running. It just runs behind the scenes. It learns from the content you put in. It's pretty mind-blowing what it does. So it essentially looks at the graph database, including all of the attributes or the metadata on any of the nodes in the database, and it builds a knowledge of how the structure is. Now that includes the properties, right? So you can literally, it'll learn that, hey, actually, when an application is delivering, 3 services and it's used by these teams, you scored at a criticality of 4. Right? So it sees those patterns and it starts to suggest those things and goes, and so we have this autocomplete. That's how we talk about it. So when you're filling in a catalog, it'll auto suggest, it'll say, look, we think the score for this application is 6. And you can just go, Yeah, wow, you read my mind. Accept, right? So you know, if you disagree, you put in your new number, and it goes, oh, okay, and it builds on that, and it goes, right, I was wrong. How do I'm going to learn? So there's a feedback loop, of course. So yeah, so AI is a bit of a brave new world. You know, and we're certainly in the EA domain, we're the only vendor who does anything like this. And yeah, it's pretty amazing, pretty powerful, and you know, we're still scratching the surface of I think what's possible.
Yeah, because I think in the last 2 years that many of our client asking us when would be the AI come into the EA tool.
Yeah, great. Well, anyway, it came earlier. Download a trial, and you'll see it in like I say, in enterprise. You basically hover over a cell, and you get like this little magic wand, and it suggests what values it thinks when it's blank, like it suggests, or it reconfirms what you've got there. Anyway, you'll see it's pretty amazing. So.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, maybe while waiting, Dr. Tim, do you have anything that you want to share in addition of what you have presented?
That's interesting. No, I mean, I wouldn't mind asking you a question, actually, Aaron, if that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. I know digital map. Okay, so I like that term. I like that you use that phrase. You know, the good thing about a map is, you know, usually there's you know, a sense of, you know, where you are. You know, I am here, or you know, something like that. So yeah, what's your sort of your feeling about giving people something familiar? You know, like I talk about with Bayan as a familiar kind of landscape. You know, you can recognize the if you think of it like an actual map of the world, like you can recognize the outline of the countries or something like that. So what do you kind of usually talk about as something that's familiar, or the starting point that people find on the map? Is it strategy? Is it what is it? What do you?
Okay, basically the concept of the digital map, I think, derived from what I think GPS today, right? I'm not so sure whether in Australia familiar or popular with the Waze. Waze is some sort of the last time, I think like 15 years ago, we used Garmin, right? 15 years ago or 20 years ago, Garmin was the most advanced GPS ever. Because I learned about Garmin when I traveled to the US. So, all the car rental equipped with a Garmin. It's nice. You just enter the destination or the postal code or whatever name, they will guide you there. So you don't need to worry about, even you miss one turn, they will suggest you the next turn, right? So now I think the enterprise, and in the context of the world that we are living in, is highly complex. What I mean by highly complex is that I don't think we know what the other department is doing, even though, say, 2 years ago, I was in that department. But now, if you ask me about that department that I joined 2 years ago, the people have changed, the process already changed, and basically, I have no clue. And interestingly, in the enterprise is that between intra department or inter department, they actually are highly dependent. But however, in every department, they have a so-called person with the power. We call it departmental head, or head of department, or head of line of business, or vice president, etc. And this type of people, typically, they have a very high ego. And of course, I don't like to say the word office politics. Office politics kicks in all the department. And of course, when the highly organization, that high performing organization, the more political it is. And it is very, very difficult to transform. So the transformation is only the buzzword that came down from the top management to the all so-called enterprise level. But execution part, there is still a lot of the politics interference. That's why the power of enterprise architecture is that we need to define the meta model. Basically, is that we need to understand what so-called the structure, the elements in the enterprise, and we map that into the meta model. Once we have done that into the meta model, we can configure it into like the tool like Evolution. So Evolution is configuring so-called the enterprise meta model that we are so-called have defined, something like a database model of particular application. So we configure that, including all the parameters, the field, the dependency, the relationship, etc. Then after that, we execute filling up that information. This is where I think the digital map will come into life, into so-called a living artifacts in the enterprise. Yeah, I think this is, many of the my encounter to many of the enterprises out there that they've implemented enterprise architecture. They're using the tool, but when I ask them about meta model, about relationship, about attribute, they have no clue about that. That's why they are, at the end of the day, they blame the enterprise architecture tool. They said this tool sucks. This tool doesn't give me what is being promised. But it's not, the tool don't give you the thing that is being promised, but you implement it wrongly, right? Imagine that you are going to buy a powerful CRM system, right? I don't want to mention that, but I don't want to mention any name. But you don't know how to configure the relationship about the about the buying history, about who has bought this, and then can we do a cross-selling, etc. So all that need to be defined properly. We need to have the attribute, we need to have the property, so that the CRM system can really help us to manage, to build a good relationship, a good rapport with our client using a technology. So the same thing with the EA tool. That's why the digital map is something that quite critical, that many enterprises today, they don't have visibility. Even you are at the top level, you roughly know what that department is doing, but actually you don't know what is inside. And with the digital map, actually we can have so-called transparent see-through glass, that we can see what they are doing, and we can understand the impact that if we have some changes, what are the impact to other department, and vice versa. Okay, I think that will be the short explanation about the digital enterprise map.
So we've got a question here. I can read it out if you like, from Boon Chung Fa. So unless you're in an industry that is pretty matured, such as finance, that you can capitalize on frameworks such as BIAN, is it more typical for companies embarking on digital EA to build the company-specific EA model from mostly the ground up, based on the company's own priorities, albeit reusing some best practice dashboard as a starting point? So I certainly have an answer for that. Do you want to have a go at that? What do you see, Aaron?
Well, I think, beyond, okay, we have one experience implementing the, okay, of course, initially we call it BIAN and BIAN, but actually they said BIAN. in the original word is, I don't know what they call it, BIAN. So I think BIAN is quite plug and play, because I think like we have implemented with one of the regional bank. I think they are quite struggling maintaining their own capability model. In fact, they engage another consulting firm to develop their so-called capability model. But I mean, in the paper, look very pretty. Whatever this consulting company developed the capability for the so-called particular bank is very, very pretty. You will fall in love with the pictures, with the color, with the graphic, and etc. But when you go into the so-called the mapping into the actual bank, they basically is not helping at all. Doesn't help. Okay. So, however, this particular bank already used this so-called the existing mapping for the last 6 to 8 years. Okay. So 6 to 8 years they've been using it, and even the team who are maintaining this so-called capability, they told me that some of the thing doesn't make sense. Okay. But they don't know what other thing better out there. Okay. Until I think we came about into BIAN, and also I introduced BIAN. I think got Patrick. Patrick is one of the BIAN consultant there. So he explained the whole thing, and everything now fall into places, because BIAN not only giving a framework at the bank-wide level, as well, but BIAN also can drill down into the implementation, into the UML. Modeling into the ERD database. So it's quite so-called a round trip model that any financial services out there can just adopt and adapt, right? So it's quite nice. But of course, some of the industry don't have BIAN equivalent. Insurance, I think they got Accord and etc. So those industries don't have this particular framework out there available, reference model. Then they can start from scratch. No choice, right? We can't wait. So what happens is that typically they are understanding the TOGAF, they're understanding the Archimate, and also they're understanding the UML, BPMN, etc. And then they connect between Archimate, BPMN, and UML into so-called start small, right? We cannot start big. So start small, we understand the context, the problem at hand, the problem description, and then we start developing the meta model, and we connect the dot. And of course, eventually, 2 or 3 years, you will getting more complete, more refined, and at the end, you will get your internal very own meta model. I think that would be my share. Perhaps.
No, that's great. So yeah, so I guess the only thing I want to add to that is that you hear a lot about people talking about, you know, bottom up, top down, inside out, outside in, you know, outside out. You know, there's all these kind of, you know, philosophies out there. One that we've liked, and I've kind of, you know, like to reference, is actually the concept of active versus passive modeling. Okay, so the distinction there is neither one is better or worse than the other, right? Because often, you know, you get into a bit of a debate about, well, top down's better than bottom up, and, you know, people take a big position, right? So active versus passive. Active modeling is where you basically say, look, we've got a lot of content. You know, I've got spreadsheets, I've got, you know, Visio diagrams, I've got, you know, plugins to ServiceNow, I've got, you know, right? So being able to pull all that content together, which is what you were referring to, Aaron. So, you know, just importing stuff, you know, if you've got 100 Visio diagrams, fine, you can import them. At the end of the day, you've got a repository, right? Now, it may all be disconnected, and, you know, and it's just, you know, a whole lot of artifacts hanging together in a central place, but that's fine. That's a very active way of modeling. And then you start to go, well, what questions can this model answer? Okay, so you're very active about filling it up with content. That can start with a single project. Let's just load all the project content in. It could start with a single layer. Let's put all the applications in. You know, it start with a single service. Let's put everything related to a single service in. So you're being very active about what you're going to model. Okay, and that's fine. And that's a perfectly good way to start. If you've got a lot of content, don't get bogged down in meta models. Don't get bogged down in methodologies too much even. Yeah, upload the content. You might find that you've just got garbage in, you know, so obviously, you know, with the garbage in, garbage out, you know, qualifier. The flip side is what's called passive modeling. So passive modeling is a much more patient way of doing things. It's about saying, well, what are the questions I'm trying to answer? So we talked about those use cases, and someone says, well, I need a, you know, a digital strategy, or a, you know, so what is the question I'm trying to answer? Then you build just enough of a model to answer that question. So you go off and you do the audit, you find the artifacts that help inform, you interview people, maybe the stuff, you know, you do that forensics, you know, archaeology as people call it, you know, maybe this stuff doesn't even exist yet and you have to create it. Okay, and that's a perfectly valid approach if you're trying to answer specific questions. So I guess to the person's question is, yeah, buy-in or something like that is a great off-the-shelf thing. You can just go boom and dump it in there. But you haven't done anything with that until you underpin it with other stuff. Okay. Similarly, if you've got lots of stuff, you know, if you've got lists of things already, and you know people have documented things, then just collect that together. We have a whole maturity model for EA, right? So, you know, just getting a repository in the first place gets you onto the first run, right? You know, we don't care what's in it, but just centralizing this stuff, right? And absolutely, that's worth doing, you know, because now things just don't end up becoming stale and old. Okay, so yeah, absolutely. There's some industries that are more mature when it comes to a reference model than others. So, you know, things like finance. I mean, defense is a bit of a mixed bag. Defense, there was a big, you know, effort to get, you know, DODAF in the US, and then there's MODAF in the UK. Australia has one called DAF. So they tried to unify those together into one called UDPM, and that's pretty much stalled. So, you know, so there's work afoot in different industries to try to come up with reference models. But yes, I wouldn't advocate getting too caught up in that. If you've got content, you've got stakeholders who are already comfortable with the way you talk about things, you know, whether it's a business process or a business function, I don't really care. Get it into a repository and start to see, in that case, in an active modeling sense, what questions can I answer with that content? You know, be active about it. Be iterative. You know, produce things within 3 months. You know, don't just, you know, get a wallpaper and go, right, I've got to fill in the 300 boxes of buy-in. You know, you'll go down into a black hole for 3 years and you know, not get anywhere, right? So, you know, yes, be very tactical about things. So yeah, good question. Sorry, yep. So there's another one. You want me to read this one out? Can you see it, Aaron? So from Kun Tektra, can we use EA to digital transform the construction industry? Yeah, well, we have. Anyway, so I'm not sure. Do you want me to take that one first, and then I can pass to you, Aaron? So yeah, we've done a lot of work. You might be pleased to know we've helped deliver a number of the Olympics over the years. So we helped deliver London 2012, the whole building of the whole London site, right? So we worked with one of our partners, which is Arup. I think, Kuhn, you might be from Arup, actually. So I don't know if you've talked to some of your colleagues in the UK, but we work with them. So yeah, we were modeling stadiums and pipes and, you know, all these kind of funny things, you know, emergency, you know, vehicles and access routes and stuff. So yeah, so certainly in the construction industry, it's been done. You do have to be careful what you do, though, because of course there's whole asset management, practices and things like that we've got to be careful we don't, tread on the toes of too much. So ultimately, though, when you're looking at the strategic side of things, or the business or the IT strategy side of things, delivering some big construction project, there's obviously hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on the line. These things need to be done with pretty reliable milestones and things like that. And so an EA approach can absolutely underpin those things. So yeah, no, we've certainly been involved in some big construction projects. We've done smart cities in the Middle East. They've designed the whole city using an EA approach. So no, there's absolutely some pretty amazing stuff. So Kuhn, I'll get our account manager to connect you with some of the guys in London, because I know they've done some great work with us. So Arab, which I think you might be with, so they'll happily share. They've done some case studies on that too. So yeah, anything, Aaron, you've done it, I'm assuming, in Southeast Asia as well?
Yeah, basically, regardless of any vertical, right? Because today I think the digital transformation disrupt any kind of business. As long as you do business interacting with the client, now it's everyone being disrupted. And of course, now it's a matter of survival. I mean, like, I think like even last year or 2 years ago that, when talk about enterprise architecture, they said, well, I got a lot of project at hand. Even the next 2-3 years, I got many requests. So I don't think I can set aside time to do EA, because not in the priority list. The priority list is that to deliver a project. Of course, I cannot rebuke too much with the team or the organization that has told me that many initiatives, but it's just that typically I just tell them what would happen 5 years from now after you've completed all the 200 projects that you have on the list at hand. What happened with that project? Would that project sustainable for the next 5 years? That's my question, right? Secondly, of course, we have to think about the project that you are going to implement for the 200 list, right? How many of them overlapping? How many of them actually, how do you know the value of every project to the business? How do you know that? Right? Yep. Typically, it's all by request. Could be some small project, enhancement, etc. Then, of course, the third one is that would they end up into the digital island? And digital island is 10 times more scarier than the island of system today that we have. Yep. Because digital island is that multiple cloud, and you're trying to connect them in 5 years from now. I think it's almost like building a mission impossible, right? So all that thing need to be so-called thought through, and we need to understand the impact. That's why I think the question is that people ask, would EA suitable for my organization, right? First thing, of course, I will ask, how big is your organization? If your organization only you and me, I think we can communicate well. I don't think I want to debate with you about whether you need EA, because what? Every day we have lunch together, every day we sit in the same room together. I know you, you know me, that's it. But when you have more than like 10 people that you don't know what they do, and everything diverse, they got multiple departments as you grow, and this is where the enterprise architecture helping to grow it together. Because like the the evolution type of the tier 2 is become a single source of truth. Because otherwise you have multiple source of truth, and in the enterprise, when you have multiple source of truth, it can create a so-called friction between the team, right? Definitely you're going to blame each other. And of course, when you communicate to external, 3 people from the same company messaging 3 different messages, and that's not good, right? So many impact. And of course now, in my video, I think I shared earlier is that if your organization can answer a question fast about any enterprise related question, then you don't need EA. Right? So basically, if like you want to know what capability do we have, if I change the strategy, what's the impact to my organization? If you can answer that almost instantly, you don't need EA. That means you already have EA practice and embedded in your culture. But if you don't, if you can't answer that within say half a day, you need 1 week or 2 weeks to tell your boss that to dig up the information to gather from other team, then you need enterprise architecture, because information currently is scattered, is in the island of many tiny island in the enterprise, and typically the information residing in the team or in the people, and this is not good for sustainability. That's why the enterprise architecture is going to distill all the information, all the structure of the organization, so that we understand organization in the deeper meaning rather than what we know today. Even though you claim that, oh, I've been working in this company for 15 years, but well, 15 years, how many departments have you moved around, right?
Yep.
How about the previous 2 departments that you already, 2 years ago? Are they the same now? You can't answer me. So it's very, very difficult to transform. Yeah, that's why enterprise architecture, taking a very critical needs, no longer luxury, no longer optional, right? To survive, you need enterprise architecture. That's my thought after I've implemented quite a number of the project and I come across talking with people. That's my thought.
No, absolutely. So we probably, do we have time for one more question, do you think, or how do you?
Yeah,
yep, so there's one here, an anonymous attendee, so I'm not sure who, but if an organization has business areas of a mixture of asset management, unit trust, property and hospitality, what's the suitable framework or reference architecture for that organization while developing their digital transformation? I'll just give a quick answer and then I can pass to you, Aaron. So, so there's certainly the APQC out of America gives what's called a cross-industry reference model. So they kind of advocate that it's kind of generic. That's fine if you don't, if they don't, they have lots of industry specific ones too. So that's fine. You could potentially look to use that. But of course, I would normally recommend if you're trying to engage with the business stakeholders, you need to be talking in a language that's familiar to them. So I would be looking to adopt several reference models because the reference models should only be dealing with the business domain anyway, right? All the cross-industry functions like HR and finance and IT, they're common, right? And you could use any, like a cross-industry reference model for that. When you talk about the business verticals, you should have separate reference models for them and they may have different meta models and that's fine. You know, we can have a hybrid meta model where you can use, buy-in for the finance bit. You could use, I don't know, for hospitality, actually, I don't know if there is one, but there might be one in cross-industry, but you can come up with different, a service, service industry one, have different ones and that's fine. Like, why not have a mixture? You use the role-based access to only expose the bits to each different, stakeholder. But again, don't boil the ocean. What you would do is you'd pick one of those business verticals that's most sympathetic and work with them first. And then, build out a stack with them. And then of course, when you come on to onboard another one, all you need to do is a different reference model at the top, but you've got all of the bottom bits right now. Strategy is going to be common. So the very top bit, and obviously all the technology is going to be a common way of thinking. So you kind of top and tail it, but that business part, why not use different ones? That's all I'd say, Aaron.
Yeah, I think pretty similar concept. Basically, is the concept of like a typical enterprise ERP, right? ERP handling the warehouse, the finance, the sales, the marketing, the human resource, etc. Everything integrated. It's the same concept. So this is, I assume, is the conglomerate group. So they got the group of hospitality, the group of maybe oil and gas, the group of transportation, the group of maybe retail and etc. Right? But typically the so-called the majority of stakeholders, they are sitting maybe in the headquarters or in the holding company. They want to know, they must have a common interest in every organization. Maybe they want to know the performance, the capability, and etc. So what happened, I think what we need to do is that we need to develop each of the vertical, their own meta model. And on top of that, there will be a so-called horizontal meta model that connect to each of the vertical. It's the concept.
As you say, finance is the common language of everyone. If the top layer is still numerical finance things, everyone's happy.
Yes. So the same concept also in our experience is that we have developed for the nation, right? I think the government of Malaysia. So the same thing that they have 25 ministry, and 25 ministry is all doing different things. It's like assuming 25 business unit, but in the one country, and they need to some sort develop a reference architecture so that they can see the impact. If any changes in the one ministry, what's the impact to other ministry? Whereby each one of the ministry are quite independent to run their own so-called operation, their own transformation, their own capability, and etc. So it's the same concept. So of course, this is very, very common. The reality of EA is that it's not vertical, but some vertical, some horizontal, and it will cross a so-called a model. It will cross. So the ability of the impact analysis also can go beyond so-called from horizontal to the vertical. Likewise, from the vertical to horizontal and impact to the rest. So the key is that we need to define the meta model correctly. If we don't define the meta model relationship correctly, we can't get what we wanted to get from the so-called the EA2 or platform.
That would be my answer. No, excellent. So how's that? Shall we wrap up then? I mean, we're out of time, I guess. So, yeah.
Last question. Let's do the last question.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Will the EA tool introduced to the organization will increase resource, or does that mean number of people? I'm not sure. Yeah. What is real? So, I mean, obviously it makes any architect more efficient. So that's the first thing. So it doesn't do anyone out of a job. Like you'll never shrink the architecture office, but it'll make the capacity of each architect more, capable, right? They'll be able to, as Aaron was saying, they'll be able to answer questions very fast. And the last thing you want to have is the architecture office being the black hole where you throw these questions in and you have to wait a week to get an answer. So certainly you'll enable, it's like a calculator, right? You'll enable the architects to be more capable. Now, does that get the architecture office to have a better reputation within the business? Yes. So does that mean the business then starts to roll out more architects around the organization? Probably. So yeah, I mean, our experience tends to be, we talk about it as we have a whole, what we call customer success kind of, program. So yeah, we tend to make the architects like heroes. We make them famous within their company. And then once you start to be the go-to person, we talk about trusted advisor. Once you start to be, you get the respect and the trust, and businesses love it and they want more and more. So as much as you democratize it and you give the end users, control over their own information, it's the synthesis of all that information that the architects have that gives real value, and they seem to be very well sought after. So, yeah.
I think just to add, that typically in every organization, if you have already established the enterprise architecture as a culture, you're using a appropriate tool, actually you will discover more things that you never thought before. Okay, that's one thing for sure. And secondly, of course, I will ask you first if you're worried about if I introduce the tool, then my team going to shrink because my boss said we already invested in the tool, so I don't need a bunch of you. But of course, now the ratio. So typically, the healthy ratio between the numbers of architects against the entire IT strength, typically between 8 to 10%, right? So if you are not reaching that numbers, you don't need to worry, because what happened, you will need more architects. Even by putting the right tool, the right meta model, at the end you need to have a more, they call it a touch point. You need to cover a wider scope of enterprise. So typically you will, your ratio, the team full strength is between 8 to 10%. I give you an example of Bank of America. So Bank of America, about 50,000 staff, they got 6,000 full-time architects, 6,000 full-time enterprise architecture team. And one of the team is the members is Miriam, is one of the IASA members. So she said that, even the 6,000 of architects full-time in the bank are fully occupied, and they are handling between 3 to 5 projects at any point in time. It's scary, isn't it? So, we are still very far. Looking at what happened in the Asia Pacific, I think we are fall short. We got the very big IT team, like 1,000 plus. The architect is like only 10, 12. Still far. It's the time of the numbers of architects need to be jumped up like 10 times. Yeah. And of course now the issue is that many of architects is also they don't play their role effectively. There's also another issue that the management at the end said, I don't need this architect anymore, because they are too technical and they are too rigid. They make things hard. They become a stopper to many of the business improvement or capability, etc. Of course, now we have to get the right tool, the right platform. On the other hand, we also need to sharpen our competency, our deliverable, our delivery method, as well as how we can bring value to the business. That's, I think, the key message about the architects. It's still in the high demand. I believe in Australia, so I think shortage, the whole world has shortage of architects, right? So, but we need to get ourselves ready to perform the right so-called role of architects.
No, great. Okay, well, with that, I guess, thank you, Aaron. Thank you. Yeah, that was excellent. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Again, after this COVID-19, I will see you face to face.
Yeah, exactly. When we can travel again. Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I'll leave it with Aaron and his team to follow up with you guys. I mean, I think we'll send the slide decks out and a link to the recording and stuff like that. But no, it's great. So thank you.
Yep, I think the rest, I think we can just, you know, there's an email. I think you can, the slide will be shared. Then after that, we can, yeah, keep in touch. Hope we can have another joint webinar or physical event in the coming months or years. All right. So with that, I think, yeah, keep everybody safe and healthy till we meet again.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.